Alright, we're going to be covering yet another battle avionics. This time we're going to be looking at Blackout Pulse, which has received a pretty big change as part of a rework. So, here we are at Flexor with the Shield of Ire and Mag Prime. Basically, the way the Blackout Pulse works now is when you fire out the Blackout Pulse bomb and then you detonate it, if you hit multiple enemies, you get extra Blackout Pulses. What also happens is that sometimes an enemy that is sufficiently blacked out pulsed, that's even the correct way of saying it, will have this electrical energy here that is basically suggesting that it is completely and utterly disabled. This is an AoE attack as well, by the way, so this actually could be very, very powerful at disabling a lot of enemies. Like so. So you could potentially pair this up with something like a good old-fashioned particle ram, if it hit any of them, which it did. Or you could potentially pair it up with something like Fiery Phoenix, Particle Ram, and then you have some basically still fighter ships that you can then just ram into, like so. So that is of course one way to use it. And alternatively, you could actually just pair this with, say, a weapon that has a lot of projectiles and has a bit of a slower projectile speed. You don't need to worry about aiming if the targets are already still. Just make sure that you're aiming at the targets already, and when they are permanently or temporarily disabled at least, you can basically hit them pretty bloody easily with something like a Vort, which I'm using right now, or something along those lines. Now, one of the big things about this particular battle avionic is that it now affects cruise ships. So let's just take out the shields of this cruise ship here, and right now this cruise ship is still attacking us, but if we hit it with a Blackout Pulse, suddenly, not only is it not moving, it's also not even attacking us, even when we are this close to the cruise ship. Because this cruise ship, just like these fighter ships, is currently being affected by a full-on Blackout disabling pulse, i.e. the electricity that is currently flowing through it temporarily taking out its systems, which means this is a very, very powerful option to use if you want to be, for example, the forward artillery gunner, because the forward artillery gunner can still use abilities. So right now this cruise ship is moving, we don't want it to move anymore, we can start charging up our forward artillery like so, hit it with a Blackout Pulse, suddenly it's not moving anymore, and we can take out its engines just like that. So if anything, the addition and the change of Blackout Pulse basically means that the pilot's necessity to pilot well is pretty much not necessarily anymore. If you are joining a team, for example, and you are looking to work as the forward artillery gunner, you really don't need to have a particularly good pilot anymore. You can actually just use Blackout Pulse as a way to make sure that your shots will always hit, provided your pilot isn't a complete schmuck, and provided your pilot doesn't actually, you know, move the ship around in some way, shape or form like AI pilots do at the moment, i.e. move it away from the forward artillery target, being of course the cruise ship. So once again, while you are charging up your forward artillery, or even if you haven't fully charged up, drop a good old-fashioned Blackout Pulse at the same time, because you can still use abilities, and there we go. You can also use other abilities as well when you're using the forward artillery, for example the Seeker Volley if you want, or maybe hell, even drop down another particle ram if you want. That's the idea. So one more time, we're going to take out the shields, and then as the forward artillery gunner, we're going to jump into our forward artillery gun like so, charge it up, hit the cruise ship with a Blackout Pulse so that it remains perfectly still, aim for the engines, bam! So that's pretty much the idea. So let's have a look now at Blackout Pulse as an avionics card. Here is the Blackout Pulse avionics card as part of the Plexus in the avionics section. So the Blackout Pulse is an electromagnetic pulse that damages enemies and disables them temporarily. If you manually detonate the Blackout Pulse, you increase the blast radius of the Blackout Pulse, and you also get to deliver additional pulses after the initial burst is complete based on how many targets were hit. So sometimes when you're using Blackout Pulse, you could end up with something like 20 hits, which essentially only really upgrades the damage of the Blackout Pulse, as it currently does 600 electrical damage, which obviously means that if you do additional pulses, then you get to do even more damage. Generally speaking though, I find that damage to be kind of meaningless. So the main thing really is just to be able to disable them temporarily. That makes it really, really strong. Again, when you're pairing it with weapons like the Vort, the APOC, Cryophon, Glazio, basically weapons that have a lot of travel time for their projectiles, this particular Avionic or Battle Avionic is going to be really, really strong for those purposes. So that's pretty much it. Really, really powerful Battle Avionic now that it has been changed. Before, it made things a little bit more difficult to do. For example, when it actually caused enemies to spiral out of control. At that point, I really didn't understand a whole purpose for Blackout Pulse. But now that Blackout Pulse has received this particular rework, I can actually see quite a very useful way to use this, and therefore it is actually probably a very, very powerful Battle Avionic. In a recent dev stream, some information has been provided through the use of stats and a graph, of course, to show what kind of avionics were being used the most in terms of the Battle Avionics. Before, the Tether was being the most used, now Seeker Volley is being the most used, but what was very interesting about it is that Blackout Pulse went from being barely used at all to actually being used quite a lot. So I can definitely see why, because it is in fact a very, very powerful Battle Avionic, and frankly I think this Battle Avionic is going to be used even more as people start to see the absolute power of being able to just basically stun lock a lot of enemy fighters and enemy cruise ships as well, especially when it comes to using it with the forward artillery. So that's pretty much it. Let me know what you think about all this in the comments below. Are you someone who actually uses the Blackout Pulse? Did you use the Blackout Pulse before the update? Let me know what you think about the Blackout Pulse now, if you happen to be one of the few people who actually used the Blackout Pulse pre-update, because I really didn't see much of a reason to use it before, but I can definitely see a reason to use it now. So otherwise, hope you guys enjoyed this. If you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more Railjack action, and until next time, I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.